Welcome to Learning Thursdays. I'm Dean Hale with the OASAS Learning and Development Unit and your host for today's presentation. Today's presentation is titled A Problem Gambling Learning Collaborative, an overview of free financial counseling for those affected by gambling harms. And my guests are Dr. Chinazo Cunningham, Commissioner of New York State OASAS, Rebecca Cooper, Director of Problem Gambling Services for New York State OASAS, and staff from GamFin. But first, a word about Learning Thursdays. Learning Thursdays are offered to behavioral health professionals as a free learning opportunity with the goal of improving the knowledge and skills of the New York State substance use disorder workforce as we strive to improve the lives of individuals needing prevention, treatment, recovery, and harm reduction services. A goal of Learning Thursdays is to support the professional development of the treatment, prevention, recovery, and harm reduction workforce. We do this by offering regular presentations that are relevant to today's substance use disorder treatment professional. As always, if there are any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to contact us at the Learning Thursdays mailbox. You can use the same mailbox to express an interest in providing a future Learning Thursdays program. And now it's time to start the presentation and welcome our guests.
So welcome everybody. I am Dr. Chinazo Cunningham, the Commissioner of OASAS, and happy to be kicking off today's fifth learning collaborative on problem gambling, which is focused on problem gambling and the impacts on individuals, families, and communities. And so, again, thanks for joining, because I think this is a great opportunity for providers to think about becoming designated to provide these services. So this is an area, we want to make sure that our continuum of services has the capacity to address problem gambling as opportunities for gambling increase in the state of New York. So what we do know is that those experiencing a substance use disorder are at greater risk for developing a gambling problem than those who don't use substances. And we also know that this work is important because of the requirement of our outpatient clinics and our opioid treatment programs to screen for problem gambling as part of the admissions process. So we know that problem gambling often is not necessarily a disorder that is easily identifiable, right? It can be silent, and certainly if people have money that's accessible and available, the gambling can continue. We also know that people with problem gambling can often rely on family or friends for loans, and then also can engage in other illegal activity to obtain dollars. We know that also problem gambling can have a devastating effect on finances and on relationships and on physical and mental health. So for today, it's pretty exciting that this is an orientation on GamFin services, which I just learned about not too long ago. And these services it's really to provide specialized financial counseling to those that are affected by problem gambling. And it's in our work with the New York Council on Problem Gambling, who provides a subcontract to GamFin to provide free online services. And so this is available to anyone who's negatively impacted financially by gambling, regardless of whether or not they're involved in other kinds of services related to problem gambling. So this is certainly one way in which the door can be opened to services. So GamFin can help with managing expenses, building savings, developing plans to pay off debt, and then also navigating financial challenges. So the goal here is to really help people reevaluate and heal their relationship with money and return to healthier ways of living, saving, and spending. So before handing this over to Rebecca Cooper, who is our director of the Problem Gambling Bureau at OASAS, I also hope that many of you have seen our public awareness campaign focusing on problem gambling. I'm actually quite proud of it, called Take a Pause. So if you've been watching, or if you watched the NFL playoffs, or if you watched the Super Bowl, hopefully you saw the public awareness campaign called Take a Pause. And that really focuses on those who are betting on sports and encourages people to go to our website and to take a self-assessment about their current behaviors on gambling to see if they are at risk for developing a problem. So as I mentioned, our public awareness campaign has been ran through the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl, and will also continue through March Madness, so for NCAA basketball. So I encourage you all to visit our problem gambling website at OASAS. It's at actually the landing page for the oasas.ny.gov website to learn more about both the self-assessment and the tools that we have available. So with that, again, thank you for joining us today. Excited about learning more about GamFin. And I am going to hand it over to my colleagues, either Rebecca or Dean.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the opening remarks, and welcome everyone. It looks like we're up to 76 participants, so that's fabulous. As the Commissioner said, this is the fifth learning collaborative we've done in the last year related to problem gambling. I am really excited that we're going to be able to specifically talk about a new service that we're bringing in for those affected by gambling harms, as the Commissioner talked about, specifically related to financial counseling. And, you know, one of the things that she did mention that I just sort of want to reiterate is, you know, one of the things that we see with people that are affected by gambling harms is the money really becomes their means to be able to wager on, you know, whatever type of gambling that they choose. And their traditional value of money will often change from, you know, a measure of security that we may think that money may bring for us, or freedom. It becomes a means for them to stay in the action. And, you know, I have a couple of just anecdotal things to share from a clinical perspective. You know, before I came to OASAS, I worked in an outpatient gambling treatment program in Albany for about 10 years. And, you know, one of the things that was very different for me as a clinician in working with those with gambling harms is the notion that we really do have to talk about money, and we have to understand it, and we have to be comfortable in addressing that when people are accessing services. And I had, you know, one of my very early clients said to me at one point when we were talking about money, and, you know, he said, I'd rather be in the game and losing than not in the game at all, which struck me. And, you know, heard that over and over again. And inevitably, you know, as the progression moves forward, you know, the people that are affected by gambling harms will certainly do what they can to obtain money. And if we think about the availability and accessibility of money, it becomes easier and easier, you know, as there's more credit card applications and things like that out there. So, you know, one of the other striking things for me when I first got in the field is I worked with a spouse that came in, and she was hysterical, and she had just recently found out that her husband had a gambling problem that he'd been hiding from her for about 3 years. And the way that she found out about it was she went to buy a car at a local car dealership, and she picked out the car, and they had low interest financing. So the salesman went to run her credit report, and she was not worried about it at all. And he came back and said, you don't qualify for the low interest rate on this car because you have 3 credit cards where you owe $45,000 that are in default. And she had no idea, you know, obviously was stunned, called her husband, and that is when he revealed to her that he had a significant gambling problem and actually had taken out 3 credit cards in her name, forged her name, and opened a post office box in their local community, which is where the bills went for the credit cards, which he hadn't been paying. And, you know, so that was, you know, obviously, you know, sort of goes along with this, the hiddenness of this, but also the importance of being able to address finances and talk about finances, and most importantly, to help those affected by gambling harms, whether or not they are engaging in a treatment program, to really help deal with those finances. And, the other thing that we know from a clinical perspective too is that those that are finding their own path to recovery is that they have to learn to manage money, right? Because we can't live without money. So we have to figure out a way, to manage that without, that becoming a trigger all the time. So the other thing that I just wanted to talk briefly about before we sort of get into the introduction of GamFin is there are many ways that people can get support dealing with the financial ruins due to a gambling challenge. And many of you may know that GA does something called pressure relief, which actually specifically deals with financial challenges and a repayment plan. Consumer credit counseling service often can be a resource. But we also know that people have many pathways to the different supports that they need related to their gambling harms. And so as we're working here at OASAS and getting input from those with lived experience and those of you that are clinicians, this really addressing finances and having the tools and resources, not only clinically, but for those specifically that are going through those financial challenges. And so we're really excited to launch GamFin in New York State, as the Commissioner said, in collaboration with the New York Council on Problem Gambling. And so today, we're going to be providing an overview of GamFin, what it is. It is actually a new financial service that is free. It'll be available to any New York State resident, regardless of whether or not they are engaged in any other support service related to gambling harms. That was one of the things that we heard and felt was really important, that this become another pathway for people to access support, regardless of whether or not they're involved in any other service. So we've been working with GamFin since December to launch this, and we have a great website, which I'll ask one of my staff to drop in the chat. We also have a QR code. And so what we're going to do today is give you some specific information about it. It's really twofold. If you're working in a clinical setting and you have a gambling designation on your operating certificate, or you identify someone that has a challenge with gambling and obviously finances are an issue, you can refer them, or they can access the service on their own. It also can become part of the clinical process if obviously the person is willing to sign a release with their financial counselor through GamFin, so that you can engage on a financial or in a clinical way as part of their recovery plan, or the person can access that and work specifically with the financial counselor at GamFin. We have trained GamFin and the staff on the types of services and supports that we have in New York State specific related to those affected by gambling harms. They're well aware of the Hope Line and the Problem Gambling Resource Centers and our community-based supports. So if at any time when they're working with someone, they sound like or ask questions about wanting additional supports in New York, that they are equipped to be able to refer them to the Hope Line or to a local provider that we work with here in New York State. So with that, I am going to turn it over, and I see we're up to 86 now, so thanks for everyone for joining. I also see some of my colleagues from a couple other states that have joined to listen in, so welcome to you guys. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison Godwin from GamFin, who is the Director of Marketing and Communications.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, so many of your stories are so similar to the stories that I hear in Gam-Anon and OpenGA meetings. Very, very common situations. So welcome to the Learning Collaborative on Financial Counseling Services for those affected by gambling harms. As Rebecca said, my name's Allison Godwin, and I'm the Marcom leader at GamFin. And this work is really personal to me because my father and brother both committed gambling-related crimes and went to prison, and my older brother attempted suicide. So that's impacted me, my husband, my mother, my brothers, my children, their children. It's not just the individual who's got the problem, but the impact is wide ranging. So through our work at GamFin, I hope to help others before they reach this point of desperation. And through financial counseling, GamFin can help give people hope and a plan. So problem gambling affects millions of people worldwide, regardless of income, education, or ethnic background. And according to the American Psychiatric Association, a gambling disorder is identified by a pattern of repeated and ongoing betting and wagering that continues despite creating multiple problems in several areas of an individual's life. And the consequences of problem gambling can be devastating to individuals and their families, as Rebecca already discussed. Among the many problems that can result from problem gambling are financial distress, bankruptcy, job loss, substance abuse, gambling-motivated crimes, strained relationships. For example, divorce is very, very common among families where you have someone who gambles excessively, and also suicidal ideation. Individuals impacted by gambling-related financial issues often feel they have nowhere to turn. Problem gambling often leads to lies, secrecy, isolation. It's very easy to hide for years and even decades. It's not uncommon at all to be in a Gam-Anon meeting to find out that usually it's women who find out that their spouses have been gambling for decades. And then the added financial pressure can exacerbate anxiety and stress. So when somebody is feeling completely isolated with nowhere to turn, that can actually lead to wanting to gamble more because that's a stress relief for them. And of course, this can lead to more problematic behavior and consequences. And this sense of hopelessness can drive people to desperation. GamFin helps relieve this pressure by helping individuals and their families gain clarity, find a path forward, and restore hope. So what is GamFin exactly? GamFin is the first organization of its kind, the leading provider of financial counseling services for individuals and families facing financial challenges due to gambling and other problem behaviors. Each of our financial counselors brings deep expertise in supporting individuals, their families, and others affected by financial challenges associated with behavioral health. We offer financial counseling sessions that are 100% secure and confidential. And thanks to funding from New York Council on Problem Gambling and New York State OASAS, GamFin can offer financial counseling sessions at no cost to New York residents who are experiencing financial harm associated with problem gambling, regardless of whether they're currently involved with another support in New York State. And so how does it work? Our financial counselors work directly with clients, providing them with a step-by-step process to financial recovery. And so here's how somebody can get started. The first step is to visit gamfin.org/NYSOASAS. And as Rebecca pointed out, you can take a look at, I believe the website was added to the chat, but we created a web page on our GamFin website devoted to New York OASAS and to New York visitors. And on the web page, when they visit, they'll see several buttons that they can click that will take them to our scheduling pages where they can book an appointment. And just to point this out, they can also see a banner that highlights New York State OASAS helpline, where page visitors can receive additional resources and support by team members trained in providing New York State support for gambling harms. And GamFin staff are also trained in providing referrals to the helpline and other support services like recovery and treatment. And it's our hope that when someone receives financial counseling for gambling-related financial challenges, they'll also recognize the importance of seeking treatment for the problem behavior that caused those challenges to begin with. So once they land on our scheduling page, they'll be asked if they learned about us from Hopeline or from a problem gambling resource center. And this helps us keep track of how many visitors are coming from New York State. So if you're helping someone through this process, please tell them to select yes here when asked if they heard about us through the Hopeline or a resource center. And then the next slide will show you that they can scroll through our list of financial counselors and select a counselor who looks like a good fit for them. And they also have the option to select the first available appointment. So it's really important, as you all know, that when somebody meets with a financial counselor for the first time, that it's a really good fit. So we encourage people who are helping someone who's seeking help that we try to find the right fit for them, the right financial counselor. So we have a bio for each of the financial counselors. It talks about where they're from, their hobbies, and certainly about their education and credentials. So once they select a counselor, they'll select a date and a time to schedule the meeting. And then we ask them to fill out a short form with their contact information. So if you're a provider filling out this information on behalf of a client, you can fill in their information and your own in the referral portion of the page. And then you go to the bottom of the page and you agree to, or your client would agree to terms and conditions by just clicking confirm appointment. And then that's it. It's a really simple process for booking an appointment. And then they'll receive a confirmation email immediately, along with some documents, just a few documents that they need to sign. And then here's a high-level view of what people can expect when they begin financial counseling. So it's a series of sessions, usually 4 sessions, maybe 4 to 6, depending on the complexity. And joining our call today is Dr. Jessica Parks-Limbrick. Jessica is a financial counselor at GamFin who can walk you through our approach to financial counseling. So Jessica, you want to take it from here?
Yes, very good. Good afternoon, everyone, / good morning, depending on which time zone you're joining from. My name is Dr. Jessica Parks-Limbrick, and I am a financial counselor with GamFin. So I'm going to more so talk about what an individual session might look like, just to make sessions less abstract and more palatable. So this slide talks about a general framework that financial counselors would follow in order to help individuals. So the first stage is to gather information. Well, what's information? Information is having the clients pull their credit reports from annualcreditreport.com. Why might we want to use that tool? Well, unfortunately, a lot of our clients don't know how much debt they have. It could just be a lot. There could be 15 credit cards on one's credit report. There could be buy now, pay later products, just a lot of stuff. So we want to gather the amount of debt that a particular client has. We want to understand their income. We want to understand what types of loans they have. So for instance, if there's 401k loans, that information is very useful because it helps us know, hey, we need to probably talk about retirement at some point. Maybe you took out a lot of money from your 401k to finance gambling related activities, but now we have to replenish those funds some type of way. Sometimes we love to jump into step 2 before we get into step 1, but step 1 is very integral. Step 2 is to create a plan. I could very easily create a spending plan, a debt payment plan in a matter of hours. That's not necessarily the problem. But if you don't understand the client, if you don't understand that they enjoy golfing as a hobby, or if they have 3 pets and 2 kids and one's going to college next month, you're really going to miss out on an opportunity to fully help them. What do I mean by that? If you didn't know that a particular client needs $10,000 for something related to their children, that might be a trigger. That might cause them to want to go and gamble again to receive those funds. So how can I kind of plan ahead with that? It could be we discuss how do we save for that money. So those are some examples of why gathering information is very important. The third phase is implement. So we create a budget, we create a spending plan, we create a debt payment plan, and we want to implement it. And I think this is where a lot of our clients get stuck. Maybe they know they should budget, they don't know which credit card to pay off first, they need help logging in to tell the system to pay off this particular credit card faster than the other ones. The fourth phase is to monitor. So it is very helpful, maybe like in the third or fourth session, to just check in to see, are the debt levels decreasing as per the plan? And most of the time things go your way, but sometimes they don't. And so in the fifth stage, we have adjust if needed. or as needed. What are some adjustments that could be needed? Sometimes clients lose their jobs. Sometimes clients find out that they're having a baby. Sometimes clients learn that they need to let in-laws and parents move in with them. So all of those are adjustments that happen. Unfortunately, just because someone is in recovery for problem gambling, it doesn't mean that life is going to stop. If anything, life sometimes gets worse. So we created a sample case, and it's very funny that Rebecca mentioned the situation with the car loan, because this is actually kind of what we were discussing. So we have a client, Max. We have clients Max and Maria, and here's some of their goals: to reduce debt, repair relationships. So coming from a marriage and family therapy standpoint. That's more so what you guys would be doing, because of course I'm not trained to be a marriage and family therapist. To create a solid financial footing, maybe having a system, maybe automating things, so that everyone knows what's supposed to be going on and there's no confusion. Healing guilt, shame, and providing a sense of relief. Those are things that, again, Max and his mental health professional would work towards, but they're still related to the finance part. Maria, who's his wife, of course, her goal might be to reduce debt, maybe providing security for her family. Dealing with shock, anger, and disappointment, I work with spouses who have recently learned that, hey, your house is 2 days away from being foreclosed on due to problem gambling. How does Maria heal from that? So again, going back to how it's very important that the financial counselor work with their clients as therapists, because this is a joint effort here. I do the calculations and the numbers. The therapists do the emotions and the healings and all that fun stuff that you guys do. And of course, Maria, in this particular instance, wants to continue her relationship, wants to continue her marriage, but it's also kind of tricky. Like, well, how do we do that, but still be mindful of the fact that Max is in recovery? So with that particular situation, how we would have come to work with someone such as Max and Maria. The two individuals have 2 kids, 2 young kids, and so they were in need of a car. So they both go down to the dealership to find a car that they like, spent hours researching. Personally, I'm a Honda Toyota girl myself, so researching and figuring out which car they want. And when you finally find the right car of your dreams, because that's a challenge, you get to meet with the finance department to discuss terms and loans. And in that particular instance, Maria finds out that they've been denied credit, denied access to the loan, due to a fancy little phrase called debt to income ratio, which would suggest that the couple has taken on a lot of debt, but Maria had no idea that that existed. And at some point, it comes out that Max has been doing a lot of online betting, maybe has taken credit cards out in her name, and maybe, and even in the most saddest of incidents, taken out debt in the children's names too. So now maybe there's an element of childhood identity theft as well. And so all of that goes on into the situation. And so when that family meets with us, it's very important that we understand that there's a lot of emotions here. It's very important that we understand that Max is looking for a quick fix so that this can just go away and we can just move forward. But the quick fix may not always be the right answer to the question. So with this particular side, it demonstrates an example of the things that each of our clients would receive. For instance, immediate needs, meaning a lot of our clients, unfortunately, are threatening to be evicted. A lot of our clients may not have any food because they can't afford it. It's actually an interesting concept to see doctors, lawyers, attorneys who are making 6, 7 figures to now have so much debt that's taking on all their income, to now they're almost as financially insecure as someone who is making minimum wage. That's how bad this addiction has become in America. So with the credit report review, it's very important that we show clients where they can find access to their free credit reports, and that is through annualcreditreport.com. I use annualcreditreport.com, not Credit Karma, because Credit Karma, not that it's an awful service, is not always accurate. Credit Karma also advertises to clients excessively. I don't want clients to have to log into something and be bombarded with all the credit card loans and offers. And now they're tempted to get in more debt to refinance the current debt they have now. So knowing what they owe in an ad-free way is very important. We create a debt pay down plan. Now, naturally, the temptation of the person in recovery and their family is to rush and pay off debt. Sometimes generous family members will offer to pay off certain loans. Sometimes clients will say, well, why can't I just use a HELOC? I can just use the equity in my home to pay this off. Because even an 8% HELOC is less than 29.99% for a credit card. That makes sense from a numbers perspective. However, I also have to educate the clients on the social implications of that, on the what happens if you don't pay that off. Now your house is in jeopardy versus just owing on a credit card. So it's very important that we have clients open up and kind of brainstorm everything they've been thinking about paying off debt, so that if they're thinking of doing something that is very rash or not financially in their best interest, I can really dig down and help them because I took the time to understand how they feel. I think the saddest thing that I heard was someone suggesting that if they commit suicide, they could use the life insurance proceeds to pay off debt. I think that one really hit me, really hurt me. And then, of course, a conversation needs to be had about why that's not the approach. And then, of course, you send them back to the mental health professional so that they don't run to that very extreme approach. The fourth step, the fourth thing that clients receive is an easy to follow spending plan. When we surveyed Americans, 70% of them say, yeah, a budget probably could help me in my life for sure, yeah. Yet 40% of Americans have never budgeted. Budgets are not fun. They're scary, they're intimidating. Budgets mean I can't gamble anymore, I can't go on vacation, I have to just live a basic ramen noodle life. And that's not true. And I work very hard to speak to clients and allow them to see we're limiting this so that we can prioritize this. So, how can you make the most out of this? The next thing is establishing guardrails. It's not to say that a client is going to go back and gamble money. So, I want to make sure that's clear. However, if they did, what can we put in place so that it is not dastardly? It's almost like if a fire was going to happen, what could we install so that it won't burn anything down? Fire extinguishers, water systems, etc. So one example of a guardrail would be to potentially limit the cash advance use on a credit card. Some credit cards allow one to limit it so that if the client did take a credit card and use it in certain machines, they couldn't do too much. Another potential guardrail that I found to be very successful is to have the person in recovery's paycheck go into an account and that person doesn't have the debit card, the person does not have the password login, and that gives Maria a sense of security that at least the bill money is here and is being paid. Those are examples of guardrails. There's a lot more, but those two are good. And lastly, a financial accountability partner. I've sat in sessions where people have cried and people have shared they just don't know what to do. They can't do it. They can't do it. And to which I, in a very maternal way, say, I'm here to hold your hand. We're going to check all this off, but I'm here to hold your hand. So I need you to start here. Can you do that? Because I realize that this has causing people to freeze up. There's so much cognitive dissonance. There's so much stress and anxiety that I can't even take the first step. So I'm going to hold your hand and pull you to the first step. And we're going to check all this off. So that's what clients receive. So this fun picture, what I really like about this picture is sometimes we have clients say, well, he handles the money. He handles it. And maybe because he handled it, referring to maybe the husband or Max in the situation, because he handled it, he was able to hide and deceive. But what I like about this picture is we see a couple working together. I don't personally feel that any one particular person should take on the entire onus of managing the finances. It could be one person pays the bills, but this other person should be at least aware of which bills are being paid, um, even in and outside of a problem gambling context. What would happen if one person were to pass away and now you don't even know who is paying the electricity bill, and now the electricity bill is not being paid? So I like to see couples working together, sharing their goals, sharing their values together, working towards a common good. And so that is my mission when I do this financial counseling work. We would like to open it up for any questions. Does anyone have any questions about using the system or how financial counseling works? And then Alice and myself can be sure to answer any of those.
So if anyone has any questions, thank you very much for the presentation. If anyone has specific questions and they want to drop them in the chat, it's probably easier for us to do it that way since we have about 91 people on. Anything related to accessing the service or any other specific questions, there were some as we were talking, and we did answer them or put the links in the chat. That brings you right to the GamFin New York State OASAS website for more information, and the main problem gambling OASAS page. Does anyone else have anything? Dean's also putting in, if you want to get the credit hours, you need to click on the link for answer key and take the test, and you'll be able to get credit hours for participation. So I don't see any
I actually have
questions.
questions. I actually have
Okay.
questions.
Oh, all right. Yay.
I think this has been really informative. So, I'm curious as to I have actually a lot of questions, but I'm curious as to just how many sessions do people tend to attend? If people sort of drop out, what are the reasons why? And what does that look like to try to get them back in? And then also, how effective, has this approach been tested? Do we know how effective it is in terms of helping people actually change their behaviors?
Allison, do you want to address that question or?
So we have engaged, maybe I'll jump in on this one. So I'm Jim also with GamFin, and we have engaged researchers now from a variety of sources to measure the outcomes. So we started this really ramping up last year with providing financial counseling services, and invariably we heard people were saying, you gave me hope. So it was sort of anecdotal, and then it started ramping up, and that's why we started saying, okay, we have to look at the data. For what we see so far in 2024, we saw that 60% of our clients came back for a second session, which is very high compared to other service providers in this space. And we know that they continue to come back and do that. Now, if somebody drops off, it is obviously there's not much we can do, but we are trying to engage with them. We have somebody on our team, what we call a care navigator, whose function is to reach out and say, is there anything we can do to give you a lifeline, give you some reason to stay in touch or stay engaged with us? And that could be like Jessica said, it could be they have food insecurities. Maybe it's the kids are going back to school in the fall. We could send them an email or say, hey, I know school's starting in 90 days or in 2 months or whatever. Do you have school supplies for your kids? If not, reach out to us and we can connect you to local resources, or we can connect you to some of the resource centers in New York that can perhaps help you in these arenas. So we're trying to keep people engaged. So the goal here is to provide you data in the next few months. We're actually having a meeting tomorrow to discuss what this starts looking like to prove this model out.
And I
That's
think,
great.
Jim, can you also just talk about the average number of sessions?
Sure. So typically this takes about 3 to 5 sessions for people to work through this, because it is not something that we can just snap our fingers and say, let's put together some numbers. And a lot of people, when they first talk about financial counseling, they think, oh, it's just adding and subtracting numbers. Everybody can do it. But when you hear what Jessica talks about, what she's really delving into, and the emotional part of it, it's really uncovering that. So I am somebody with lived experience. I destroyed my life as somebody with a gambling disorder. It's been more than 21 years since I placed the wager, but I was incarcerated. I lost everything I owned, lost my career, all of that. So this is something that is of personal mission to provide these services. And I can tell you, I called a helpline first time in 1997. And first time I went and actually sought help in Gamblers Anonymous was in 2003. And those years in between didn't get any better. And the secrecy of all the finances are what are really the challenge. I would be fighting tooth and nail when I got confronted with those situations where credit cards were denied or whatever. My ex, we were buying groceries and our debit card was declined when that should not have been the case at all. And I had to explain, I'm like, must have been a fraud. It must be at the bank. I'll take care of it. And again, I'm hiding the secrets. I'm hiding the debt until there's one day that it's a big surprise. And then I think that's the thing about this space, is that there's so many secrets. It's hard to uncover, and you have to understand how to ask the questions, where it is an engaging walk alongside process versus a confrontational adversarial conversation. And we give people that safe space to have the talk about what is really going on. And for a lot of people, what we hear, this is the first time I've actually talked about my finances without fear of being yelled or screamed at. So yeah, I hope that answers some of your questions, and we will be providing data in the near future.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Jim's working on like the numerical impact, but I've seen impact, and I guess maybe due to HIPAA, there's not too much I can reveal, but I've seen people take on, have the courage to ask for a bonus. I've seen people pay off debt. I've seen people come to me and say, hey, you said I'm supposed to save for this. So I went ahead and started doing 100 a month because you said we should save for certain things like emergencies. So a lot of this work is qualitative and it's really hard to measure, but there are, of course, some numbers like Jim said. And going back to the part about finance is not simply just math. This work is also emotional. And when I say that, I mean, going back to the statistic that I shared, that 70% of people said a budget could help them. Well, not every American is using a budget. So if they know it could help them and they're not using it, it may not necessarily just be the math. It might just be lack of motivation, or I don't want to. I don't want to, because maybe there's a fear that I'm going to talk about money and somebody's going to yell at me. And I won't necessarily name any particular individuals, but just look at kind of like the news, look at kind of like the YouTubers and everyone who talks about money. They tend to have a very stern, yelling connotation, and in my opinion, that's not, well, first of all, that's not how you should talk to people, but secondly, I find that to be very ineffective to yell and judge people for mistakes. What's better is to educate them on why that mistake wasn't the best choice, so that in the future they can want to move forward and change. So we can see how we don't want to talk about budgets because we don't want to talk about money, because that means people are going to yell at me, and nobody wants to sign up to be yelled at. So yeah,
Thanks.
so that's my touch to that.
Yeah.
I know there are other questions I'm sure, Rebecca, you're going to get to in the chat. I just want to say I appreciate So we at OASAS are very much about a data-driven approach. And I know there's really a dearth of data when it comes to problem gambling. And so this is, this is not a New York State issue. This is a national or global issue, right? And so I am very interested, and I know we are working with you to collect some of that information and data. So I just so that you know that this is very big part of our direction and vision, not just about problem gambling, but everything, right? Is we have limited resources, of course, and we want to make sure that we're using those resources to be most impactful. And so I think, so I'm very, very interested in sort of how this all plays out. I think the second thing I just want to comment on, and I really appreciated Dr. Limbrick, your comment, you used the term guardrails about, ways in which people can reduce harms. And so harm reduction is another term that we use a lot more in the world of substance use. And I definitely see what you said as that's a harm reduction strategy, 100%. And I'm a physician, and I've taken care of patients for, decades, and had similar kinds of stories where, patients would put once they got a check, they would, have these ways of like ensuring that check didn't go to spend on crack cocaine, right? So that they would pay their bills. So they had this whole system laid out so that their bills would still get paid, and then they would sort of give themselves a little bit of money, but not so crazy, to then spend on whatever substance, so they can do it in a way that's a harm reduction way, so they wouldn't lose their housing, they wouldn't lose their whatever, right? So I feel like there's a lot of similarities there too. It's really a harm reduction approach, because people still have to deal with dollars and money in some way, but can we do this and set this up to sort of help them and protect themselves and reduce the risk of them developing harms with with their dollars. So anyways, just some of those ways to kind of connect how this fits within the broader approach that we have at OASAS and with New York State.
Yeah, and just to add to that, sometimes clients aren't ready to stop gambling altogether, but maybe logically they'll say, well, look, I know I can only afford to do $50 a month. So I can, and there have been times where clients can commit to only doing under 50, and they're paying off the debt. And now they're saying, hey, wow, 3 months later, I have so much less debt. And she showed me the math, and maybe I don't have to gamble to pay off debt. And slowly over time, we see, well, I don't, it disgusts me when client used the phrase, it disgusts me to gamble, and I'm just going to pay this off. And and that's one of the reasons why having a good relationship with the client's therapist / mental health person is key, because we don't want to turn away somebody just because they're saying, I don't want to. We don't want to turn somebody away just because they're not entirely ready to stop. It could be the plan is what's helping them desire to stop, going back to what we talked about, harm reduction. So that's a good point.
I think, Commissioner, do you have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, no, I mean, I see there's a lot of questions, and so I definitely want you to
no.
be able to get to those. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. One question from Joanna: is there minimum amount of debt a client needs to be in order to refer to GamFin?
No. There's no minimum, there's no maximum. We have people that come in with $10, $20 million in debt, and we have people that have a couple $100 in debt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, just to add to that too, I think, one of the things with people that are affected by gambling harms too is sometimes we get caught up in those numbers, like how much, when it is about the debt and the numbers, but $100 in debt could mean something very different to one person than it does to another. And, so I think that's, one of the really great things about this as well. So the next question is, I think this was already answered, but Christine said, will GamFin address immediate needs of clients where there's a need for emergency housing or SNAP? And the answer to that is yes. They, have that linkages, and they have the linkages in back to us in New York as to, what services are in communities. Obviously, if someone's in crisis, they will refer them or do a transfer to the Hope Line. The next question, someone's asking for a copy of the presentation, and if you go, Dean dropped in the chat the link for the Learning Collaborative, so that should be posted soon after this, and that presentation will be there. And Allison, Jessica, what are some of the most common questions you receive from new clients?
That's a really good question. It's starting to be seasonal now. So around this time, it's hey, I have some money in free play, and they'll just say it. And so underneath that question is it okay if I take the $5 and play? To which I talk to them kind of about the pros and cons, and I use an example of, well, I got a $5 coupon in the mail from a store that I said I wasn't going to go back to, so I know I'm not just going to spend $5. So kind of check in with yourself. Are you really only going to spend the $5 or the $50? I get questions about, should I refinance? Should I take the equity out of my house to pay off my credit cards? That's a great question for people to ask, especially given if their bank has sent them lots of emails and everything about that. I get, hey, my credit card company says I can get a 0% interest credit card for 18 months. Should I get that? I got a W-2G. How much taxes do I owe? So with the taxation, I especially want to refer them to a certified tax professional. Fun fact, I actually live in Las Vegas, so I don't have any state taxes. So by no means am I an expert on New York state taxes, and then there's local state taxes. So it would be foolish for me to say, yeah, you only owe this, when that's well beyond the scope of my expertise. So I get tax questions. We get questions that are hinting about bankruptcy, but don't ask directly. And it's kind of up to me to decipher that they're hinting at, is it okay to do bankruptcy? And as we know, there's a stigma associated around bankruptcy. So that might be why clients don't want to come out and say, well, should I file bankruptcy? So debt settlement, I get basic questions like, should we use joint accounts or separate accounts? And my answer is always, which one will keep the peace in the relationship? So lots of questions like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple more. We're getting down on time. Mara, hi Mara. Is this financial help towards gambling debts or household bills?
Both. Both.
Yep.
You can't separate the two, because hey, for instance, the car broke down. Yeah, that has nothing to do with problem gambling. However, I didn't have the money. So my thought was to take the $50 free play that I have and go to the casino, because I needed $1,000 to fix the transmission. And we've all been here, folks. We've all had car problems. I have myself too in the past, so I get it. And so both need to be addressed, because chances are if they have gambling debt, they probably have household debt too, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And if I can just add something to that, I think it's really common for people to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, but to have two separate piles of money, if there's any money left. But one is for household use, the other is for gambling. And you will rarely see anybody take gambling money for household use, but you will frequently see them take household money for gambling. So, Jim, you can speak to this a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, as somebody who with lived experience, you better not touch my gambling money, because that overrides everything. And it's sort of this weird relationship. And that's part of the conversation, is you have to understand that it's all one pocket, right? It's all one financial picture. And that's why it's really important to have that conversation with the client, that it's all one pool, and it really is prioritizing what's the responsible debt management and household bills. And then if it is somebody who's just trying to do harm reduction and they can set aside $50, like Jessica talked about to gamble, and that's how they want to move forward, then that is acceptable. But it's about putting things in perspective and really putting up those guardrails so they're not damaging the household or their overall lives for the gambling.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have one more question. Kathleen, is there any literature that I can get to give to counselors to review with clients or just the website? Good question, Kathleen. Right now we just have the website, but I don't think that there's any reason why we can't put together, if you're looking for a flyer or something that you guys can have in your gambling designated programs. We'll take note of that, and we'll look to see what we can get developed with GamFin so you have something actually physically, right, that you have. And also for your clinicians that counselors that could not attend, this will be a learning collaborative, so you can also use that as an educational tool for them as well. All right, well, I think we're at the end of our time. We did drop
Rebecca?
all of, yeah.
It looked like there was maybe Saida said that we missed her question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Was that about multiple sessions or if it was limited? So there was a question about if it's only 4 to 6 sessions. If more are necessary, we do evaluate that and can provide that. It's typically just 4 to 6 because that's what we can get. We get that done. But there's certain unique situations that pop up where it takes more, and there's more complex situations where there's multiple there's family members, there's businesses, and that takes more extensive work. And if we hit 6 and we haven't completed the work, then we're not just going to say, oh, we're done here. We're going to make sure that they get the help that they need. We're not really, but that's the average, but we have to justify why it would go beyond that. And we don't want to be, because we've had this happen where people would call in and just want to set up an appointment for the social interaction with the financial counselor because they're lonely. So we want to make sure that there's a reason and justification for providing additional sessions.
I think the
So that was
question
but
was,
my question was actually about the service being utilized as a prevention measure. So my
Yep.
question was
Yep.
about the fact that in the communities we serve, financial education is not really customary. It's not things that are a part of like the everyday conversation. And so I was curious if this service can be utilized as a preventative service, or is simply for those who are identified with a gambling disorder.
Well, what we've done in other states, and this ties into the affected others, the people that are affected by somebody's gambling, because they know that they're gambling and they're saying, okay, it's affecting my financing. Then it's about them reaching out to us and we can educate them on putting up those guardrails, how to protect themselves. And that is a preventative measure in itself. But there is a gambling component that we are looking for as part of the overall approach to this project, because we want to measure how it impacts gambling. But again, it is really saying the affected others, which has been a neglected group, for lack of a better term, that they can use this as a preventative to stop it before it gets to the depths where everything is gone. So once they realize it, and if somebody's asking or finds out that there's some lies and excessive spending relative to gambling, they're probably only, by the time they're uncovering it, they're probably only seeing the tip of the iceberg. And it's time to have a deeper conversation about it.
Yeah.
But Saida,
And
I think you bring up a good point, which is this is something we can talk about at OASAS, because being proactive here and thinking about prevention and are there resources that we can help develop with expertise to think about how we can help our community. So I think that's a great point, and I think it's something we can think about more as well.
And I feel compelled to say this. If we're talking about at-risk people, because because there's more research now about the genetic predisposition to addiction and gambling. And if somebody can identify that they're at risk because they have a history of problem gambling or problem behavior in their family, I think it'd be a great opportunity to try to reach those people who are, or ADHD, that's another high-risk group for this.
All right. Well, thank you. We're at the top of the hour. This was a great discussion, and we appreciate everyone participating. And again, it is a Learning Thursday. There's several other questions coming in about whether it will be posted or not. So it will be, so that you can review the slides and actually take the quiz to get credits for it. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks
so
for
much
having
your
us.
support. Okay, bye.
I want to thank everyone from GamFin for joining me today. I hope you all find it useful while assisting clients in need of services. Your feedback is important to us. It helps us to know if we're meeting your educational goals and expectations. Once you have viewed the presentation in its entirety and completed the quiz, if prompted, please follow directions to access the SurveyMonkey website and take a moment to complete the evaluation, including suggesting any future topics for Learning Thursdays. Once again, thank you for joining us and keep up the good work.